Down, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
This is like promising title, right?
I thought, well, it's a good one. Got to be prepared. Center for Global Studies. He's a lot birth to death. We have something for everybody here. Early childhood, we've got Alan and all this really childhood.
We have to see how we can include
Now we
this
have-
in the fundamental challenges of global.
We need to rewrite our brochure. Our website needs to be updated.
I never ordered those before. They go, yeah, for like just like a music maker.
Oh, something about death. Something about death.
Cool in here.
It warms up with all the
Bodies,
bodies.
people come in,
Already
all the hot air,
I already feel that.
all the academic hot air.
The number. Okay.
I wanted to make it directly to this, but there's no way for it to come out.
Also the bridge here. I'm gonna get real close to you. Feel it. Bonding. We're already bonded. We have. Over our shared love, problematic media. Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's all. With comfort and nature, yeah. That's one spirit.
May I have a second of your attention, please?
I would be very grateful if you could do this thing. You can just scan the QR code, and then at the very top you can enter this code. And just fill in the blank, and we can start after you are done.
Otherwise, you have to leave. No, it's okay. You can still stay.
All the QR codes this year, hey, everybody? It's a thing. Yeah. Yeah.
You want to show the results as well? Everybody.
Oh, wow.
Enter.
Oh,
So we have to enter that code up there, is that right? Or no? Yes.
Yeah.
Traditional's word.
Anybody got the second one? Read some trick. You can't get the second one. Closer to death.
autocorrect wants to correct my spelling.
English is a tricky language. I'm still not sure how to write my own names.
All right, should we get started? Have you done your little exercise? Okay. So, good morning on this wonderful fall day. Thanks for joining us this morning. We're here with Yuliia Vatysk, right? Before I introduce Yuliia, let me just point out that we acknowledge and respect the Congress and Southeast Walmart peoples on whose territory the university stands, and the Kwangan and the Sanj peoples, whose historical relationship with this land continues to this day. And with this land acknowledgement, let me introduce Yuliia, who probably doesn't, most of you will have met her in the hallways. Yuliia is a visiting fellow at the center, who's currently pursuing her PhD at the Institute of Philosophy and National Academy of Science of Ukraine. And probably that's important to, when you consider her framing in a second in the Department of Philosophy of Culture, Ethics, and Aesthetics. And Yuliia has been here now for, what is it, almost a year? Or?
Almost a year.
Yeah. And she will give us a sense of what she's doing in her PhD that is entitled The Perception of Human Mortality in Ukrainian Culture in the Context of the Russian-Ukrainian War. And you will see that she deals with heavy subjects, also the title, Death in Life for today, looking at issues of death, collective memory, and memorialization. With respect to particular organizational setting, but Yuliia, that will be all yours to tell us. So the floors are yours, and again, it's such a pleasure having you at the center, and I'm really curious to hear. Yuliia gave me an article of hers to read, so I will do this in more detail, but gave me already first skimming through this, the sense of where this very exciting project is going. So Yuliia.
Thank you so much. And actually, I'm very happy that most of you already know what I'm doing, so it won't be a secret here. And the topic of my presentation today is death in life, between nothing or the other. So today I will briefly tell you about my academic biography, about some background information about mortality awareness, the other as a philosophical phenomenon. I'll present some research findings of psychologists who work in the field of terror management theory. They are very interesting, so maybe they can be useful even for you. And also I will present a bit of my own research. These results are unpublished, but still, I guess they are valuable. So I'd like to start with a quote I really like. This quote is from the book The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker. And it says, man is literally split in two. He has an awareness of his towering majesty, and yet he goes back into the ground a few feet in order blindly and dumbly to rot and disappear forever. I guess it sounds perfectly well.
On a birthday.
Happy birthday.
Well, it sounds pretty well the glory and the tragedy of our existence, but it's not the end. At least of my presentation. So
It's getting better.
what brought me here today? Actually, now I'm feeling. I didn't know that.
I think I may leave.
I didn't know that you have your birthday today, so I'll start with this. Yeah.
Audience.
The World Health Organization claims that approximately 700,000 people die due to suicide every year. And this and some other reasons from my own led me to write my bachelor's thesis on the topic of distinction between suicide and social murder. It was actually the very beginning of my scientific journey around the topic of death. So also we will talk about the war. I had an opportunity, being an undergrad student, also to be a cadet of the University of Defense of Ukraine. And I also studied the suicide prevention and the methods of propaganda, both internal and external. So it could help me to understand more what I'm working with. And it led me to write my master's thesis on the topic of the archetype of the heroic death in mass culture, because when we are talking about propaganda, we are also talking about propaganda that is that has its attention on the soldiers who have to sacrifice the most precious things they have in their lives. It's life. So it made really perfect sense when I finished this work. It was 2 months before the full-scale invasion in Ukraine started. Also, xenophobia. I'll talk about xenophobia later. I'll just use these slides to share the topic of my PhD dissertation. You've already heard that it's about mortality perception in Ukrainian culture. Yeah, as you may understand, I'm Ukrainian. And I'll also talk about the concept of the other, because it's an essential concept to understand cultures. I'm not sure how many people from humanities are here and how many people are from it's called science. Yeah, it's hard to distinguish, but you got the point. So I hope my presentation will be helpful to get familiar with some philosophical concepts. And I'll share one fact that I also will cover a bit later, that there is a psychological experiment when, after being reminded of death, people tend to become more xenophobic and hostile towards others. And well, Danny told me not to tell you, but I find it fascinating because it actually explains a lot some things that are going on around. So about mortality awareness. And everything starts with narcissism and primal omnipotence and immortality. And I'm talking about the primal omnipotence and immortality when a child is just born. When the psychoanalysts of the 20th century, psychologists of the past, they thought that people are born, like a blank canvas. And actually, it's true. We don't know about such abstract concepts as death or something. We learn it through others. So children are born with this feeling of omnipotence of their parents, obviously, and their own omnipotence, because when they cry, when they scream, their needs are always covered by their mother and other surroundings. So the older we are, the more traumatic events are going on, because we learn that we are not the only precious thing in the world. And we also learn that a hamster dies, a granny dies, and I will die too. And it kind of gives us trauma. So consequences of mortality awareness are such as self-esteem. That is our first defense mechanism against this fear of death. Long story short, the better self-esteem, the lesser dread of death. Because when we are confident in ourselves, it's easier for us to overcome this inevitable thing as death. Also, we have the worldview. Worldview actually makes us feel as a part of something greater, and thus we feel less fragile, even though it makes no sense. But even this understanding and feeling that we belong to a greater nation, or for instance, a religious confession or something like this, it makes us feel stronger because we are a part of this immortal, almost immortal community. Also, we have heroism. I also talk about heroism later. Heroism, when we are talking about heroism, we are talking about how people admire heroes. In our opinion, heroes are people who were able to overcome death. When we are talking about archetypes, about mythology, those are people who were literally fighting in the other world. Some were enemies when we are talking about myth, for instance, of the ancient Greek or something. But in our day-to-day life, our heroes are famous people or people who, mostly famous people, okay. And we hope that their fame allows them to live longer. And we hope that we can also share kind of this fame, just being identified the same as these heroes. That's why children, teenagers are so obsessed with superheroes and this kind of stuff, because it makes them feel like they also can be like them. When we are talking about the other, well, it's one of my favorite topics, because the other is actually a philosophical concept, and it helps us to understand a lot, because only because there is the other, there is me, there is the self that can observe and to identify our own values and important things in the world. But because we have the other can also challenge our perception of the world. The other also is a source of knowledge about death. I know that it sounds obvious, but honestly, death is a phenomenon that cannot be lived through directly. So we literally need someone else to die to understand what's going on. And we can speculate a lot, but we don't know what's going on after our death. So here we only shape our own feelings, emotions towards this challenging topic only when someone dies, and we can experience this loss and grief, and we can reflect what death means to us only because of the other. But the other can also be a threat to our worldview. As I mentioned earlier, the worldview is very important for us because it helps us to be a part of something greater. But the other also has their own worldview, and somehow people work the way that someone should be true, someone should be correct, either me or them, and it's never both of us for some reason. So we perceive the other as a real threat, and that's why people tend to neutralize the other in many ways. Through cultural suppression, marginalization, physical destruction, many ways, just to get rid of this threat that our own worldview cannot be true, cannot be real, cannot be legit. I guess everyone remembers these holy fights between different religions of the past and of the present, I guess. So the connection between the other and death. This desire to eliminate the other arises also from our need to avoid confronting our own mortality, as I mentioned. So it's also the way to avoid this awareness of our own death. I'll try to explain it on the examples further. So here I want to share some of research findings from the terror management theory. It's actually a theory from social psychology. It was well developed by three researchers, Solomon, Pshizek, and Greenberg. But today it's not about them. Today I just want to show you some interesting results. So there are actually experiments in psychology. Mostly they are done the way that the control group haven't seen anything about death. The other group has been interacted with death either through reading or through writing about it, and people could compare the results. So as I mentioned earlier, being reminded of death made people more hostile towards the other. Actually, these about nationalism and charismatic leaders, I have to tell you more detail about these experiments, about the nationalism. They took three companies. One of them was American, and the other one, the next one was maybe Chinese, and let's say, for instance, Arabic. And the control group, as I mentioned, haven't interacted with the mortality cues, as they are called in psychological literature, and the other face them. So when people face the reminders of death, they prefer their national company, because obviously the experiments were in the United States. And people chose their national company, even though it had fewer benefits. It was the workday was longer. The work in general was much harder, but they still used it only because the logo had, I don't know, the Statue of Liberty or something. So they chose it over an international company with much better benefits when they were scared of death. Also, the charismatic leaders. I guess this experiment was shown also in the United States in 2016 when Trump won his elections. But the experiment I'm talking here about is psychologist wrote three portraits of presidents. The first one was task-oriented, the second one was relationship-oriented, and the third one was charismatic. So again, control group without mortality cues, the other group with mortality cues. And it's interesting that among 94 participants, only approximately 4 chose the charismatic leader when they were not reminded of death. But when people were reminded of death, it was about 36 people who chose the charismatic leader. Just after a short essay about being dead and not being able to think about their own death. So when people are, when they are afraid, they tend to love charismatic leaders more. Actually, I tried to explain it when I talked about heroism, because maybe they believe that heroes can overcome this feeling of death or something, but okay. Dehumanization. If you had an opportunity to watch a great cartoon, Pocahontas, you could maybe remember an interesting episode when the governor started singing his Disney song, and they were thinking about American Indians, that they were savages, and barely even human. Because it's our own defense mechanism, as I mentioned earlier. And it's very common for us trying to dehumanize the other, because we cannot compete with someone who is equal. But when we call them pigs or underhuman, it's much easier, because they don't worth our, they just aren't worth our efforts. Actually, that also leads to consumerism and some of our decisions. When I ask you now what you would choose, Rolls-Royce or maybe Chevrolet, you will start thinking logically, yes? You will start thinking about how much money you can spend on Rolls-Royce, about fixing details, maybe you need a garage or something like this. But the experiment I want to talk about was conducted this way. They took, interestingly, depressed people, and and they immersed one part of these people in mortality cues, the other not, and they showed them some ads. Ads like Rolls-Royce, maybe Rolex watches, you know, something luxurious. And then they evaluated, they asked people what they think about things that they saw. There were many different things. And when people were talking about Pringle chips or maybe Chevrolet, their opinion hasn't really changed. But when we were talking about conspicuous consumption and something more luxurious, they said that they would consider buying it much more often. For some reason, it helps maybe us with self-esteem, because this experiment also mentions that people with shaky self-esteem tend to choose more conspicuous consumption.
Looks like a coffee.
That's horrible. Also, interestingly, that can lead to misogyny. It's kind of counterintuitive. Sorry. It's kind of counterintuitive, but from what the authors of the series say, when we think about animals, we see them dying, and we try to think about us as people who are above all of this dying bodily thing. So all body functions that are part of female being, like giving birth, menstruation, or this kind of stuff, they kind of dread people because they remind them that our body change, that our bodies get older, etc., etc. So there is a whole bunch of research, both speculative and experimental, that shows that mostly men are more afraid of women because and more angry with them because they remind men that they can also die. Because actually men were more privileged, do not have such mortality cues as women. I want to mention that here I didn't include as references, but I have them in my own archive. So if you need any, please, I'll share my email because it's just too much information to talk briefly. So I want now to talk about death and work, and it will be about my own research. So this is the topic of my work. You may see that it's very Ukrainian, it's very long. I'll try to read it for you. The impact of experiencing mortality in individual and national existence of the motivation and narrative practices of memorialization workers in Ukraine. Yeah, and I want to start with the question, do you work with something like this? Maybe you should work with the archives of maybe famine of the past. Or maybe you work with something like this, as people in the Holocaust memorials work every day. So I used to work for the Holocaust Memorial Center, and maybe it was my inspiration to conduct this research, because I wanted to understand what does motivate people to work in such circumstances of pretty hard mental load. Also, what is their relationship with death? And how does their work affect them? In my research, I had 46 employees of Ukrainian organizations, both non-governmental, national museums. Actually, I had 56, but only 46 I included in my final results. 13 women and 16 men. I had 8 organizations. I want to emphasize one of them, National Museum of the History of Ukraine in the World War II. I had the biggest number of answers from this organization because this is actually one of the biggest museums in Ukraine. It has, I would say, hundreds of employees. When we are talking about other organizations, sometimes it's 5 people or something like this. But still, these 8 organizations are from 3 different cities, and we also had the representative of war journalism. I don't know where she is from, but also her insights more interesting. So it's a good opportunity to acknowledge the help of my colleague Danny. He is here, some of you may know him, but he did all the data analysis for me. And if you have any questions about numbers, please, it's not to me, it's to Danny. So the results. Now I want to show you motivational factors to work. From the most important to the less important. As we see, salary is on the 7th place. Social status is on the 9th place. But the most important thing is social mission of the organization. That is what it was actually my hypothesis, yes, because what leads people to work for little money in hard mental job? So yeah, social mission. And the second one, it was actually very interesting, psychological climate. Good relationships with colleagues and other stakeholders were important for these people. So it's not about salary or recognition. It's more about pursuing something meaningful in their lives with good people around. And when I asked them if people would leave their companies, maybe for better money, 72% refused to quit. And as I mentioned here, 10 out of 13 who would change their job were young. By young, I mean from 20 to 35 years. And I don't have that many people in my research, but I can assume that in this age, we tend to think more about salaries because it's harder. We need to provide children, we need to cover lots of things, we need to compete for our self-esteem to become bosses, this kind of stuff, to prove something for ourselves and others. So I think it makes some sense. Also, their work was very strongly related to their desire to contribute to future generations. If we're talking about responses, it's 91% of responses were people who answered very much or somewhat strongly related to the desire to make contributions to future generations. And actually 10 out of 12 researchers, I had different groups of people. I included researchers, people who work in administration, tour guides, publishing work. So I knew who are these people. And when we see the results of people who are researchers, they chose very strongly 10 out of 12 times. While responses of people from other jobs, I don't know, IT support or tour guides or you name it, they were more even about somewhat strongly, maybe not strongly, you know. But here, researchers, and important to mention, almost forgot, researchers were people who worked the longer time out of other professions. So these people who normally worked more than 3 or 5 years at their place. So I don't really know if I connect this response to their job or their time of work, but it's an interesting thing to think about. Also, I've got proofs that youth is more anxious about death. I'm not new here. Actually, the psychologists from the term management theory proved it already many times, but again, I had this perfect proof that I had one question when I asked people, is it important for them to be remembered by, and then I offered as many people as possible. It's not important at all, only my family, maybe my family and colleagues, you know, like from the biggest to the lowest possible answer. And people aged 20 to 25 more often answered that it's important to be remembered by everyone, as many people as possible. And their responses were 36% among all 5 age categories. Only one category took a half of the answers. Also, how often do you think about your own mortality? You see the results. Half of them think very often, and in other age groups, this distribution were much more even. Also, among those people, as I mentioned, I also had a question about who should be these people who should remember you. And I also included one answer that is like, I want to have a museum named after me. I want to have a street named after me, you know? These are not even the people I know or who knew me. But 71% of the answers who claim that they want to be remembered, you know, even in the way of just having their own street museum, etc., again, were people 20-25. Again, I wasn't first in this field, but I guess it's a good proof. But it actually makes sense, and the psychologist has already explained it, that when we are young, we still have to build our self-esteem to understand who we are. We actually don't have the things that can preserve us from this fear of death. We don't have children, we don't have a meaningful career, we don't have anything that could help us. So this fear wears off with time. Okay, and about the other, 65% of my respondents claim that their job has influenced their perception of sufferings of the other in some ways. Here, I also want to share you some qualitative results. Actually, now I want to complain that it's very hard to present something in philosophy because we work with the text, not with pictures. So I tried my best. I hope you like it. So these are the quotes of the people who answered an open, non-obligatory question about how their job influenced them. And you may see the results. One of them I could collect it into a theme that it increased their desire to live in any way. Like there was an acute reluctance to waste time on unnecessary things, and on the contrary, a desire to devote more time to loved ones. The next one is, in the context of my work, the concept of the value of human life and dignity deepens. The value of people's lives has become a higher value. I began to appreciate life more. Yes, these people work with death and they began to appreciate life more. Life can end unfairly at any moment. I guess those person worked at the Holocaust Memorial Center. So the other topic is life and death shared for the other and shared with the other. It actually was very interesting finding to me because some of them, I didn't include all of the quotes because some of them were too long, but you may see to live for, to die for, or the death of a loved one can become a motivation to live in a different way as a memory of them. And here as a philosopher, I started speculating about that at this point, we don't live alone. At this point, we share our death and life with someone else. Depending on the answers, it was someone who was alive or dead. So even like everything is interconnected, and we really share this experience with the other. We not only perceive someone else's death, it also influences our life, and the cycles go on. And of course, the power of the collective, especially now during the war in Ukraine. Such thoughts intensify mainly during direct commemorations of the memory of the dead. And also the other quote is, I realize the fragility of a person as an organism, and at the same time, the strength of the collective despite external circumstances. It's what I was talking about, the worldview. there is something bigger. We can be a part of a bigger nation, and it helps us to overcome our own fears. So this was it. Actually, I think it's perfect timing, 40 minutes. And it's time to present you the results that we had, because before I show you the results, I will tell you, because it was a real experiment. People took these 3 words that you fill the blank in, and they showed these words to people who were reminded of death and who were not reminded of death, who were maybe, I don't know, buying coffee at Starbucks, let's say it. So it was really interesting because, Leah, could you help me? Because depending on the interactions between this experiment, answers were different, as we will see now too. Okay, I will share you the answers. Yeah. Okay, something's going on. We don't have many answers, but you see, you were thinking about coffee. You're used to drink coffee. But if you were thinking about graves, cemeteries, and other stuff, maybe you would answer coffin more often. So, yeah, I like our answers. It wasn't the real experiment because you knew my topic, maybe we were discussing something, but still, it was interesting. Green. I would never answer green, honestly.
I put Greek. I thought Greek.
Well, it wasn't great anyway. So yeah, thank you. And as I mentioned, this is my contact email if you have any questions or stories.
Thank you, Yuliia. Would like to start us off while you're thinking. Very quick question. Your results for the group of people working at the memorial site.
Yeah.
Don't they contradict what you said in your philosophical reflection? You know, for there you said if you get accused of mortality, you become more xenophobic. You know, your hatred towards the other. Whereas these people, they're empathetic. They learn from the cues. They seem to relate well to God. I'm just wondering, you know, is it the way we are, you know, how these cues are read, or?
Yeah, actually, I have my own speculations because firstly, there's a difference between this acute and chronic exposure. When something happens quickly, like, I don't know, a terrorism attack, it makes us much more. Sorry, I need to start from the article from 29 about from 200, from 2009. I'm so sorry. This article actually shows a good distinction between works of this acute and chronic death exposure, and I don't remember the other part of the graph, but still it had 4 different grades. So you actually will see it in my article, but people who work in Holocaust memorials and other memorials in Ukraine, their level of death anxiety is actually medium. It's not high because it's chronic and, how to say, not direct, you know, not direct exposure, because for instance, when you are a firefighter, it's a direct exposure. So there is a difference.
Mediated.
Yeah. So yeah, in my article, I reference to this article, and also about empathy. Yes, we are talking about empathy towards us. What about the other? For instance, there is a war in Ukraine, and we cannot tolerate Russians, for instance, even though many of us have family or ex-coworkers, but still this fear of death, this dread, it doesn't allow us to think logically. We just hate the other. And I guess it's okay, and it's very common.
Thank you. I'm not sure, two of you. Oh, the three of you. Let's go from right to that. So Kelly, you say that.
I love this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I was wondering if there's any way that you tease apart or anyone teases apart death and that fear or how we feel about death, and then suffering. Is it?
Actually, it's a very interesting question. It's not the topic of my own research, so I'm not sure, but I guess, as I mentioned, when we're talking about the direct exposure of death, as maybe firefighters, they have kind of emotional sufferings. But when we're talking about direct sufferings, for instance, illness or maybe tortures, I'm not really sure. I do believe they exist because the topic is actually well developed. I was surprised, but no, sorry, I cannot answer.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was so helpful, and it really initiated new ideas and connections. So, and it's a very heavy topic.
Yeah.
So I'm quite impressed how you take it to.
Me too.
Yeah, I know. So one thing I noticed is the grief connection.
Yeah.
People who work at those places.
Yeah.
Actually, we in daily life, there's research that people avoid grief.
Yeah.
So because we avoid grief, we fear death.
Yeah.
So and I was wondering if there is that grief connection with people who face those photos and you know, the feelings. So that's why all those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 kind of with that grief connection, the values also come in, because people who accept the grief actually feel more joy in life. So that joy actually is the psychological environment.
Yeah,
you know, it's and I was just wondering if you happen to or think about that in your analysis, because to me it's fascinating how you know those values actually influence.
With such questions, I always like to answer, I did it for free, so I didn't have much resource to collect lots of data. So no, but as a person who worked for such an organization, I can speculate from my own experience. And I guess, yes, it firstly makes you think more and maybe to grieve, especially with hard topics that are connected to your own past, to the past of your country. But I also will say that there is a defense mechanism. It was also actually described in an article from 1993. There was a psychologist who conducted a research among the workers of the National Holocaust Memorial in the United States, the one in Washington. So yeah, they felt kind of traumatized. It's proven that people experience post-secondary traumatization. Actually, it was proved 2 years ago by German researchers. But when we're talking about this article, that psychologist, he showed that people use this defense mechanism just because it's really hard to stay in this topic. But it's not the only way. They also created group meetings at this Holocaust Memorial before opening. They created group meetings to discuss their work, and when these people felt connected to their co-workers, to co-workers from other fields, I mean, people from archives and people from publishing, they work in different buildings. It helped them to overcome. So I guess there is some point when they could discuss their grief, because there are lots of quotes in this article when a woman were like, I'm watching this documentary, I'm looking at their bodies and everything, and I ask myself, why should I live? How can I laugh at a joke of my husband if this is what happened in the past? So yeah, I guess these people, they went through a lot.
That makes sense.
Yeah, especially good.
Many.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great presentation. I'm thinking so many things. In Mexico, we celebrate the Dead of the Dead.
Yeah.
The Day of the Dead and El Día de los Muertos. And I was thinking just like in this cultural aspect, how and it's connected to the memory and the memorization and the history and the narrative that is shaped around a concept such as that. Personally, I love that because I love life. And yesterday I was talking to my son and we were saying, we are living and dying every day at the same time. And so what happens in the middle is the adventure. I was trying to be like a cool mom yesterday. So we were very philosophical around that. And then you come with this and it's like just so present, right? But so I have several things to comment and I'm gonna be quick. Just thinking about the sense of that when you were speaking about the narcissist and the omnipotence and this, but then I was thinking about the sense of transcendent and the increased desire to live. How different from the theory to the results, almost like seeing this jump from what the theory is offering at the beginning of your presentation, and then later it's more about the value of life, the dignity, the memory to honor others, the devote for the loved ones. So for me, that speaks about almost a way of just different, right? Which is, for me, it sounds good. But
maybe I should have mentioned it more, but when I was talking about omnipotence and immortality, it was more about a newborn baby, you know, because with age, with our cultural development as human beings, it goes away and wears off. So
yeah, which honestly I also kind of disagree and everything a little bit about a process.
And I also agree, and I agree with your disagreement because this is a theory of the past.
You don't know yet. And what I disagree, but if I can say.
I just want to briefly mention, I took this from actually the book of Ernest Becker's The Denial of Death, and it's a bit outdated. It was written in 1973, and I'm not really sure about the roots, about narcissism and all this stuff, because it's too psychological, too psychoanalytical. I'm a philosopher. It's not my way of research. I just presented the results that people was inspired by to develop their own theory. It is, I'm not sure if it could be even proven. We are talking about newborns. So I disagree with you. Oh, I agree and disagree with you at the same time because there is no
philosophy.
Yeah.
I agree with you and I thank you for all these prompts. And I disagree with the concept of being like a baby born as a blank canvas. Because I think we're coming with more, but that's, as everything here in academia, we can choose the approaches, the frameworks and the lenses and the theoretical frameworks in which we will present something. So I appreciate your prompts. Like it's really making me, it's having a great impact because I'm speaking a lot. I'm like, it's instigating, no, motivating. Like it's impacting me in a good way, you know, like it's making me feel lots of things. So that's congratulations, like you're moving me. And that's not that I'm not easy to move, but and just to finalize my final thought, it's around again this memory and memorization of your proposal, because as everything like in history, who tells the story, for what, how, with what purpose, and laid by who? I'm thinking also how culturally we define that, and just thinking about like, okay, in the museums, seeing these, like, is this maybe influencing an insensitivation of death and the empathy of life? And perhaps, I don't know, I'm just philosophizing. But again, how the culture or the system or the society leaders will say what death means and how that can shape the reality and the narrative of a group of people or a society in particular. And now, like I can imagine in a time of war, how that is also shaped. It's like we want people to maybe, I don't know, because I haven't, but in Mexico, like even how we started here with that topic, we started with a sense of humor that maybe was shaping our uncomfortability, but I kind of was concerned, like how professional are we with your topic? If I will be you and people is laughing, I'd be like, that's cool, but this is serious. But I don't know, then I might like also the framework and the narratives and the culture and the society, when we share it also in a, just trying to bring the global aspect as well, the intercultural aspect to death, the cross-cultural, and just like so thankful for your presentation today. I'm like my brain is in fire.
Actually, I'm shocked that you said that you would be confused and be serious, because isn't it Mexico's El Dia de los Muertos that celebrates actually, you know?
Oh yeah, we
so they are not serious and grieving.
I know, but I got concerned because I was like, this academia is the presentation, it's a global talk.
They don't give me any grades, so
I know. Like that intercultural aspect and the cross-cultural settings.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah.
May I say something just to honor the death, you know, day of the dead? I was just thinking that it's a connection with the ancestors. So actually that connectivity carries on.
Yeah.
So death is just part of that process.
Yeah.
Again, like, you know, it's, whereas in the other worldview, you know, death is the end, right? So there is that worldview difference that moves us as well, the spiritual.
Yeah, and also I want to add to your first part of the question about the narratives. I bring up this topic in my article because there are many ways how a country can broadcast its narratives. There is a governmental level, of course, but not all the time, and sometimes not much, because at the time of the war in Ukraine, you know, our ministers have much more important things than narratives. Actually, it's a joke. I don't think that there is more important things, because actually the soft power is winning the wars right now, but it's a different question. So there is a governmental level, then we have the Ministry of Historical Memory. If I'm not mistaken, it's the real ministry in Ukraine. And we have the civil society level, where people from different non-governmental organizations. I showed you the list. There were 2 or 3 of the organizations that were governmental, national, and other were non-governmental organizations that gathered, and they present some results, some exhibitions, etc. And they actually broadcast the narratives. And well, I don't believe that we can be 100% objective, because we still choose what to show and what not to show, especially in narratives. And I do believe that working with such a topic also influences people's perception even of the other, and which artifacts they choose to show, what they want to present, to emphasize, etc. So I do believe that this level of work in museums, it also shapes national narratives. I still haven't developed this thought yet, you know, as a complete sentence. I'm thinking about my other article on this topic. But I do believe that these people, these workers, they contribute at some level to national narratives. Hard to say at which level, but somehow they do it. Yeah.
And how do you want to use the findings of your study to sort of disrupt or interrupt or enter into those narratives? What do you see as the value added of what it is that we found here in terms of those narratives and the creations of nationalism and terrorism that museums do so
well? Maybe I shouldn't say it here, but in Ukraine, we didn't have much time and money to develop our own national narratives. And it's actually the reason why Russia was able to annex the Crimean Peninsula, to start the war, and even to win the war in Westerners' mind. So to be able to broadcast our national narratives inside the country and outside the country, because foreigners visit these museums, foreigners read about our country on Wikipedia. So we should understand firstly what's going on inside our own heads. And actually, it's hard to say what I can do practically, because, you know, I'm only a PhD student, what I can do. But I do want to help to understand how we can utilize it in the future. Because some of the people from these organizations, I know them because we work professionally together. So I guess we can, it's like our unconscious bias. We have unconscious bias. Even though we can be the smartest people in the world, we still have this bias. And the only way to fight this bias is just to know that you have them. So maybe it can help us in the future.
Maybe could I add something to Darlene? Sorry, I'm again bringing up these mundane research questions, after the philosophical discussion about death and mortality. But I'm wondering, just the tension. On the one hand, you're here as a philosopher, and you speak about general traits of how we deal with death, the memory and how it triggers particular reactions. But then at the same time, you say, oh, but these reactions are so coded by national context, by cultural specificity. So I'm just wondering, to what degree can a philosopher really help us understand those if they pan out so differently, let's say from Ukraine to Mexico, so, whether they trigger xenophobia or not. Can philosophers really help us understand this, or do we need sociologists, cultural anthropologists, right, to really tell us, when these general, human feelings and sensitivities are translated into particular social and political reactions?
I'm actually glad that you asked, because it's a time to show off a little bit. I'm
doing from the philosopher.
I'm doing a PhD in philosophy only because we cannot do PhDs in many fields. Okay. So I utilize lots of interdisciplinary approaches. I also had my fellowship at the MBA in Tokyo. I used to work as a PR manager. I also have my degree in military political science and psychology. So maybe my PhD is only in philosophy, but I try to use researchers. Actually, well, maybe this is my academic advisor listening here. Sometimes I get some disagreement from my colleagues because I'm not philosophical enough. Because I try to use a lot to answer practical questions. And if in the future I'll think about postdoc, it will be cultural anthropology. Because I see some limitations of philosophy at this point. I want to have practical results, over speculating results.
Absolutely no excuses needed at a center that celebrates interdisciplinarity.
Yes,
so,
of course.
So in this respect, I'm fully with you. And I just felt the tension between, the first philosophical part and then your focus on a particular group that operates in a very particular setting, right, and professional task. Anyone online? So, Jody.
Thank you. Your presentation was wonderful, and it's also really great too. It was really nice. I guess my question is a little bit on religion. You didn't have it sort of as a category on there, in my understanding of, like how much do you believe in the afterlife? How much, and how connected are you to God or to, so did you layer that in the work as well?
I didn't have this question because it was a free research, and the question about religion itself is very complicated because in Ukraine we are mostly Orthodox, but we visit the church once a year, so it's really hard to evaluate, so I just avoided this question. But when we are talking about religion itself, I include it into the worldview category because we become a part of, being Christians, for instance. And we live in this worldview. And actually, there is a really good result. There is a good article about there is a community, and the more community demands you to sacrifice for this community, your money, your time, to wear specific things, do not eat meat or something, the more this community have chance to survive. So people, for some reason, need some communities, some worldviews that doesn't allow them to live their life fully. I don't know how to say, but maybe it creates this image that if I sacrifice a lot, it can really help me to live better in the next life. Because actually, in my opinion, the religions started from explaining the questions about death. Like all of the religions, I don't know any religion that doesn't have a question about death. And I had an interview with a Ukrainian chaplain who worked for Ukrainian armed forces right now on the battlefield. And he told me that Actually, the real birth for Orthodox monks is their death. So it's incorporated into religion that you start to live properly after you die.
I was thinking about that too, but also the kind of the individual versus the community aspect, and even politically thinking about that, about how you relate your part in something bigger than the whole. Yeah.
Hard to say. I need to think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions in the room or online?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Leah.
This one, you don't have to answer it if
Yeah.
it's like too, I don't know. But like since, let's say like from you did a degree before. So after that to now, has your perception of like your own, I don't know, like how do you think about death and how does it affect how you live, and like how did your research affect you personally? Or like your family or your
I'm actually really thankful for you to ask this question, because approximately half a year I was reading a book Staring at the Sun. It's not about the sun, as you may understand, it's about death. And it was written by an existential philosopher, Yuliia Vatysk. Some of you may even read this book. It's pretty popular. And at this point, I started to understand that it's not only me who is writing my dissertation, it's only the dissertation who is writing me, because it really influences my life and my perception. And sometimes it can be motivational a lot, because I want to make the world a better place. But sometimes I really have to admit that it makes me to feel something like, today is a very good sunny day. It's a perfect day to be happy. But when it's a rainy day in Victoria, I always think like, what's the point of my dissertation if we die anyway? So yeah, it's true. And even this existential philosopher, Yuliia Vatysk, he works with the topic of death. He works with people who are afraid of death, and he emphasizes that it changes us. So I started consciously taking into account how my research influences me. Currently, it's important for me researching me, but I guess it changes me. Maybe Daniel can answer this question better. So yeah, I do think about it sometimes, and maybe it helps me to be more connected to my past. And I finished my program here in March, and I'm going to go to Ukraine after I finish my program. And what I want to do is to conduct a field work in the village when my granny lives now, and where she was born and where I spent my childhood. Because first I want to collect all the possible data from my grandmother. As you may know, the Soviets, they like to destroy a lot, so we don't really have many data. So she's the only living person who knows something about my past of my ancestors. And also I want to research some rituals, some maybe this kind of folklore stuff in this village, because it's a rural area, it's the area where I grew up, so I'm kind of sentimental, and I guess no one is interested in this area, so maybe this data will be the only data about this region at all.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yuliia. That was a fabulous presentation. You could tell from the reactions you got here. How much longer will you take to complete your doctoral thesis? Do you know?
Well, I'm expected to defend it in October 2026.
Okay, so but you will be here until March? That's
until March, yeah. I have 1 year of my fellowship here in Victoria. Only 1 year.
Yeah, so anyone who wants to talk about death, yeah, that's always there. But most years, I hope there won't be too many rainy days for you. that you can make good progress on your. That's such a privilege, for us to hear about this and be part of your journey. An exciting one clearly, and good luck with the next steps. And so, thank you very much. And I'm going to stay for one second. Jody's going to come back with surprises.
Okay.
Yeah. So who's supervising?
Yuliia Vatysk is my supervisor
in Ukraine.
In Ukraine, yes.
Okay. I hope he's happy with the turn that your PhD has taken here. Is it different to be away from your subject? So what does it do to you? You're being so far physically away from the subject of your research.
It's interesting because actually the results of the article I showed you today, I conducted this data while I was doing my research at the University of Tsukuba in Japan. So, and I finished it in Canada. It's interesting, but I promise people that their answers are anonymous, so I still would have to gather data anonymously. So maybe it doesn't really change a lot in this case. But yeah, it's interesting. But I don't know. I have always been driven by practical results, and even my master's degree wasn't actually in just philosophy; it was applied philosophy. It's just, I don't know.
Not reading through very quickly, skimming through your article, I realized, you're torn in many ways, but that makes it so rich, right? Yeah, so
and hard to publish.
I know. There is, if you think, because Yuliia has a question, right? How can I publish research like this? And unfortunately, our journals are so very specific and specialized, right? That sometimes the format that they have, it's not so easy to be adapted, right? So I think it speaks more to the limitations of our scientific world than to your research, right? Yeah, that we are so compartmentalized, right? And the scripts that journals have, what they expect in a quote unquote good article, are limiting. So I can feel your frustration.
Yeah, thank you.
I think one of the things, thank you, Yuliia. One of the things I've been thinking about, I think, one thought about that is that what I think about the circles of thinking about death that I'm attracted to are those ones that are that where there's no end of life, or ancestors, which First Nations communities and African communities that I've, or Buddhism, or other. I'm interested in those ways of understanding death, which also connect us to the rest of nature in a curious way. And I think sometimes that some of the the religions of the book, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, have played a role in cutting us off a little bit from the rest of nature, making us very special as humans with our own kind of things. So I'm and that's not, of course, at all. That's not. I mean, the death is the common feature, but I'm interested in I'm just wondering if, as we move, as those of us interested in in the planet and all of that the entire life, the entire life, not just human life, whether drifting towards those kinds of spiritual traditions will how that will affect our fear of death, or our relationship to other but not just other people, but other species and things like that. So it's an interesting
indeed.
Interesting topic.
Now, adding to what Bud said, I want to share some of my personal experience. In Islam, death, in different cultures, as she said, it's a different cultural experience. For example, some cultures celebrate it as something very a happiness or something. In Islam, the religious teaching is that you have an afterlife and you have a special code of like how you should live, and most of the time when people die, we grieve. Okay, there is grief, but at the same time there is hope. So personally, for example, I do not anymore believe in all those things. So now, although my socialization has been done in that perspective, but now I don't think, I look at all the other natural things, like they die, what happens? Why am I special? So I don't understand this thing, like my brain doesn't accept this thing. But because I'm socialized, I might not believe in the afterward or something, and it's not a happy thing, death or something, and I'm not expecting any reward or something. I don't feel myself depressed because I'm new into this thing, like not believing in the previous socialization or principles. But I'm really scared of that because now I don't know why I should be good. Okay, I think like, okay, I should be good so that there should be harmony. But I think religion had an important role in all our how we conduct ourselves or these concepts.
It's true.
So I don't know. And I haven't gone into that, or maybe I'm scared because I can't figure that out, but I no more believe in that. And the simple thing is like, just like, look at the plants and all those other animals. I mean, they just die and they perish. So, okay, if I die, it's okay, whether you throw me away. Bury me, I mean, it doesn't. And also, if I die, so what? Like, we think that our name remains. Some people find it in children or other heroic things, just like you said. And I think if I die, that doesn't matter for me whether my name is there or not. Or if people have people who have died, I mean, does it matter for them if they're still alive? But in terms of, especially in those suicide bombers, because I was back in my culture, women don't go outside, but my husband that time, he saw several young boys and they were happy to die. But that is even another phenomenon because all those priests, and they have this imagination of a promise that they will have beautiful men and women, in other words. So those boys were happy to die. And they were really happy to die. So how culture and religion can
Do you have a short answer to this?
Sure, 1 second, please.
Oh, I'm moving off.
I have a short answer. Actually, it's not mine. It's from the book Staring at the Sun, from Irvin Yalom. What he offers, he is also, he was a Jew, but he's not really a believer. So he also had this kind of issue when, the book is not valid anymore and what should I do? So his idea is that even if we don't have children, for instance, normally having children is the easiest way to continue being alive in someone else. But even if we don't have children, we still can do our work as we can, to be good people as we can, because all our deeds or our influence, it still lives in someone else. When there is a good teacher, he lives in his students' lives. So when you just do good things, you help people and you still continue living in like a drop in the sea, but still you live in their lives forever and ever, even if your name no one remembers anymore. So it's one of the approaches.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect transition to birthdays as celebration.
Yeah.
So
Is that your supervisor trying to come in up there?
Yeah, this is my supervisor.
Trying to say hi. The camera's coming on and it's been on and then the speaker.
I'm not sure.
Which one is your supervisor?
Я вам говорю,
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Should we say hi?
like there are some.
Look, yeah, it's turning the
Yeah.
camera.
Hi there.
Thank you for coming.
Wonderful to meet you this way. We would love to share some cake with you.
It's actually 10 p.m. in Ukraine. So
Yeah.
well,
Okay.
Too late for cake.
Thank you for joining us so late.
Yeah.
Okay, so the people just walked in, you think we have very deep philosophical debates here. So
Maybe he wants to
Yeah,
say
but
something.
that-
He wants to say something.
please.
Well, hello. Just pleased to hear this interesting event, your questions, and just want to thank you for the support you give for us, for our postgraduate students. Very interesting discussion, especially about this point about grief, because maybe in Ukrainian culture, our culture of grief, yes, and I just think about that just experience of dying, existential thing is one thing, and another, especially cultural phenomenon is grief, like extended experience, extended in generations, connected with memory. Very interesting point. Thank you. Thank
Thank you
you.
very much for joining us, and it's such a pleasure to have Yuliia here in Victoria. So we hopefully we can collaborate, in the process of bringing this dissertation to a good close.
Thank you.
Shall we go to another dimension of transitioning in life?
Celebrate life. So yes, we want to celebrate. Here's the thing. I don't light candles and I can't find fire anyway. So I don't light them, but I don't light them because I don't like when people blow on a cake. But we're gonna sing. We sing, and we have candles. We have 2 amazing birthdays. We have Bud's birthdays today, and Leah's is on Friday.